Hey, good evening, everybody. I'm PennLive opinion editor John Mysick. Thanks for joining us this evening for yet another PennLive reader panel. Today, we're in the middle of June here. It's summer. It's a quintessentially American time of year, and we find ourselves embroiled right now in a very essential debate about what it means to be an American in 2018. So tonight, with a verifiable cross-section of Central Pennsylvania residents, we're going to talk a bit about those issues and some other questions that are in the news. We'll be here for about the next hour. My friend and colleague Paul Vigna will be passing around a stick microphone to our panelists, and hopefully at the end of this we'll have learned something about each other. So with that underway, here we go. Thanks everybody for coming out tonight. We have some of you are familiar faces. Some of you are some new faces, so I think what I'd like to do real fast is have everybody introduce themselves and say what town they're from. So, Brett, if I could start with you, please.
Sure. My name is Brett Miller, and I'm from Campbell Borough. I'm Sandy Strauss, and I'm from Harrisburg.
Keith Quigley, Perry County.
James Morgan, York County.
Tanya Morgan, York County.
Vincent Blackwell, Warrensburg.
Mike Caterino, Boiling Springs, Monroe Township.
Claude Phipps, Harrisburg.
Keith Mitchell, Harrisburg.
Brandon Flood, Stilton.
Dwight Edwards, Harrisburg.
Patricia Stringer, Capital City, Harrisburg.
Joe Davis, Harrisburg.
Mark Scoreggi, Camp Hill, but married a Perry County girl.
Which almost makes you an idiot. All right, with that out of the way, I think, Mark, since we ended with you, we shall start with you. We've been talking a lot about what it means to be an American. And I think what I'd like to do is ask the panel in one word to sum up what an American means to them. So you're on.
Freedom.
The ability to move around and pursue justice and happiness.
I would say freedom also.
Difficult.
Privileged.
Liberty.
Like with Brandon, privilege.
Liberty. Opportunity.
Proud.
Challenging.
I'm not sure anymore.
I'm going to say challenging now, too.
Blessed.
The liberties have it.
But actually, James, I think I'd like to go back to you. I mean, why challenging? Why difficult?
Well, just challenging, and I say challenging and seeing some of the things that are surfacing now that were hidden before. Although as an African American, I was aware of it, but it's more blatant now, and it's something that I didn't appreciate growing up, and now my children are subject to it, and my grandchildren. And so I said that's challenging, because we're back to trying to basically struggle and get to where we're happy again.
And sir, you said challenging, difficult. Why?
It's difficult because, as the other gentleman said, I grew up in the 50s and 60s, and I saw the racism that existed, covert and overt. I saw the hard times. I was told that I couldn't go in certain places. I was thrown in jail for walking down the street while being black in the military. Difficult because even though I went overseas and fought for people's rights to protest, my people protest about the treatment that they receive by police, and they are called unpatriotic. Difficult, because as a patriot, I carried a rifle, and I went after other people so that they would have the right to protest. And yet, my people say they want to protest for rights, and they are looked at as less than American, being unpatriotic. The very thing that I fought for, the very thing that I put my life on the line for, that others protest, not violently, but peacefully. And they're told that they're unpatriotic. Most patriotic thing you can do in America is peacefully protest.
Brandon, I think, did you say privilege?
Correct.
Why? And wondering how that squares with this gentleman down here.
I mean, we've heard the term, bandied about, whether you're talking about white privilege, male privilege. So, living, given the fact that we live in, by and large, was considered the richest country in the world. You benefit from privilege, from those resources that we have at our disposal. But also, I was looking and I was speaking in the context of male privilege as well. Me speaking as a black man. Now I'm one of the few people that I don't think privilege is exclusive to one race or gender. You understand the situation and the dynamics before you, and you utilize that to your advantage. But it all comes down to whether you're using it for good or for evil. There's one phrase that that sticks out to me: using your privilege to combat prejudice. So I like to think that I'd be using my privilege for good. So that's why I use that term.
Claude and Keith, I see you nodding. What were you nodding at?
Yeah.
Either one of you take a crack at it.
Well, again, I would agree with lots of what Brandon has said. I went back and said, he said privilege, and I wish I could change that, because I don't see privilege. I use embarrassment as an American. I feel sometimes embarrassed. In a world, we're pictured to be a certain set way. Americans are, when you go to Europe, Americans are stereotyped to a certain point. We waste, we want, because again, this is something came after World War II. We were the nation that basically helped restructure the world, helped rebuild the world. But again, I think we lost our way a little bit. We can't impose our will on people. We can't impose our values on people. Sometimes we have to understand that there's differences that every society, every nation, every group has. And we have to be able to accept that and balance that out. You say, this is where privilege comes at. We probably have more than most nations. We waste more than most nations. We don't appreciate what we have, okay? And again, it's that type of feeling that we are passing down to, it's generational, we pass down to our kids and to their kids and their kids. And I think that's something we need to change, okay? We all live on a globe, okay? This is a community globe. We all have to share what's here. We all have to try to understand one another and sometimes empathize with the other person, okay?
Keith.
I didn't realize what it meant to be an American until I went outside of this country. I was in the Philippines, and children ran up to me because there's an assumption that other countries have that as an American, you're rich. And probably based on their economy, we are rich. But I also found out being an American has nothing to do with race. They see you as an American, whether you're black, whether you're white, no matter what race you are. And as a result of that, they have an expectation that you're a certain way, economy-wise, understanding, humanity-wise. All of those things have a responsibility as Americans.
Mike, you wanted to add something?
Yeah. First of all, I'm very impressed with everything I've heard so far. I would say when you're talking a wide variety, that America is unique, and I think that liberty and religious liberty are inseparable. And in this country, if you look at all the religions that meld together without a state religion, that's very unique. And I'm just so impressed and in awe of the Founding Fathers in their wisdom. But America to me is the 4th of July on the Jersey Shore. Listen to John Cougar Mellencamp in full volume. So there There you go.
Brett, I wanted to come to you because you threw down the gauntlet pretty hard there. You don't know anymore. Why don't you know? What don't you know?
I'm disappointed in what has become of our reputation as Americans.
Yes.
And that's why I say I'm not sure anymore, because I was brought up with believing that this was the greatest country on earth, and we were all privileged just to be, you know, here in this room, and we've taken for granted so many things that, you know, we just have. And I think what's happening today, even by the second, it seems, with this president, it feels like we're really going backwards. And I'm afraid, I'm very, very, very afraid for our country, for our children, grandchildren. They will be reading what this man says and tweets. And I don't think it has anything really to do with politics. It's something that is disastrous for humanity, not just America.
Is it something that's specific to this administration now, or is this, because pollsters look at right track, wrong track, that kind of, it's the great cliche. Is this something that's been sort of nagging at you for a while that is now sort of peaked, or is it something that's specific to our time right now?
Well, it's something that I really didn't believe somebody could ever be like. I don't want to say lie, but the falsehoods that are out there are really scary, because people do get their information from the news, whether it is, you know, social media or, you know, major networks. And what is put out there is false, misleading, and I think, well, I think a lot of things, and I don't want to steal the microphone too much, but I think we're losing track as Americans, and it's very upsetting what's happening, especially with the whole border thing and the children. I do not think somebody should be using children as pawns to get their wall and force, as he says, a democratic policy, or policy of the Democrats, which is completely wrong, because it is his policy.
Sandy, I'm going to do next. You were nodding, and then we'll go to Vincent and then to you.
Well, first I want to say I do actually love our country in a lot of ways, and I feel that I have a certain amount of privilege, but I feel challenged right now, and this has been coming on for a long time, and maybe it's because I'm of the work that I do, and I'm very much aware all the time of what's happening. The growing gap between rich and poor, which has been getting wider and wider over the last 30 years. Systemic racism that has been going on in our society that seems to be maybe not peaking right now, but much more obvious. The things that are being done in our name, like ripping children from their parents at the border. There are other things that are going on, the dismantling of the EPA and our environmental protections. All of those things are really troubling for me. And as an American, I really resent that those kinds of things are being done in my name.
Vincent.
That's an opportunity, because it's an opportunity for me to serve. No matter what our president did, I can choose to serve in the military like I did. To get injured in my neck and back, and it'll be for the rest of my life. I can serve in my church. I can serve in the Boy Scouts. This is a government of the people and by the people. We are not President Trump. We are not that swamp in Washington. We are an aggregate of the United States people, of different colors, different countries, different religions. And what we do is what we become and what we're responsible for. So what's happening on the border, I can't make President Trump change things. I can't make Congress change the law. I can't make Mexicans not come across the border, and Chinese, which is a significant portion. I can't make them stop. But all I can do is help my fellow man and set an example to be the best person and the best Christian in America I can be.
Tanya, we'll come back to you. Go ahead.
I wish that the question was framed, which percentage are you? Because I'm a bit ambivalent. My one-word answer was proud, but the fact is that there's a mix of emotions when that question was presented. And there is some ambivalence. I have to echo what I heard from Brett and some of the others here in the panel, and more so that my answer, and I will stick with proud, because I look through the lens of an African-American lens, and because I don't know what it's like to view it through the lens of a white person or Latino, because our experiences are very, very different. Although we have, over centuries, have encountered oppression, struggles with systemic racism, overt racism, things that are hidden. I am proud of the fact of what my people, African Americans, have overcome over the years. We are a resilient people. We are people that fight back. We rise above situations. So that's where my pride comes in, through the lens of an African American. And that's where I speak. And I'll continue to be proud of my people, because when we do live under the guise of liberty, we all know that liberty, in my mind, isn't afforded to all people.
Right. Right.
I just wanted to say that you are absolutely right about you can serve in a variety of ways, but I do think that there are things that we can do, and that is getting in touch with our U.S. senators, our elected congressmen, so that they understand that what we believe is going on with the Trump administration is wrong. We have to be vocal. We have to let them know this is not our America, that we do not want to see what is happening. So there are things that we can do. We don't have to just sit back and, chat and take it, exactly. We all need to stand up and be much, much more vocal.
All right, before we go to our next speaker, I want to take a quick poll of the crowd here. How many of you, irrespective of your political belief, think that if you call your local state representative or your member of Congress or United States Senator and lodge a complaint with them, that complaint will be heard and acted upon? What's your degree of faith?
Just one is not going to get it.
Exactly right.
One complaint to your senator is not going to get it. I was told that if a congressman gets 5 or more complaints about a specific concern, they will begin to respond to it. One is not going to do it. And the more people that respond to something, be it positive or negative, the better reaction you're going to get from those congressional representatives. We can, in terms of what's going on in America, we have to let folk know that we don't like it. We have to. If it's things that are not right, and I guarantee you, we turn our backs on our allies. And we make friends with our enemies. I don't understand it. I don't understand it. I don't understand how our president, our government just loves the North Korean president. And embraces China and does these other things, and turns his back on Canada and Mexico and people that we've been allied with since the beginning of time. these folk that mean us no good whatsoever. They decided that the Russians said, we want to destroy America. Well, we're doing a good job of destroying the whole concept of America right here and now. We got a Secretary of Education that does not believe in public education. So what happens to public education? We got an interior guy who does not believe in preserving the resources that we have. God gave us this planet to take care of. He didn't give us this planet to rip up, destroy, take what we want from it, and then leave it empty. But we've got people in office that want to destroy. I don't understand it. That I'm overwhelmed by the fact that a lot of people take this and say, this is good for America. Well, I don't understand it. I can't. My mind just won't allow me to understand how we are reacting. You got kids crying for their mothers, and we as a look. I go outside the country. I've been to Vietnam. I've been to Thailand, I've been to India, I've been to a lot of different places. And yes, people respect us as Americans. But guess what? The things that we're doing now, they don't do in those countries.
Actually, I want to go to Pat next, because we've not heard from you or from Mr. Davis yet. I mean, your thoughts here so far on what you've been hearing.
Well, I agree with the other people with, you know, after the election and everything, you know, there was all these groups that had, you know, had sat back and been quiet. And now these people are knowing that it'll affect their everyday life and everything, and they've started to pay attention. So people who wouldn't even think of getting involved in maybe some sort of action plan, they're forming little groups that, like, you know, I come over here and people who weren't, I didn't even think that they were involved, because politics is in everything, whether what's sold in the grocery store or anything. And now people are becoming more active, and you have to advocate for things if you want to bring about change. And I've been aware of this for a long time, and of course, I know it's the voting that makes the difference.
Mr. Davis.
When I first spoke, I spoke about the ability to move and happiness, the pursuit of happiness. This is not an easy task, and it has been difficult through the years. I remember going to a white-only bathroom only to be told, you have to get out. I'm a Marine, and I'm dressed in my uniform. I have to get out. I've gone to a restaurant and told, I'm sorry, we can't serve you. So I was in charge of my group, so I went outside and gave it to a white Marine. And I said, you go get the food for our group, and he did. It's not easy being a minority when the majority, or it's not the majority, but the dominant culture reads the menu for you. And being in a minority, then you get clubbed into subgroups. And then that's more difficult. You know, and you begin to think, is it because I'm black, I'm of color, that I can't, you know, have my pursuit of happiness? And I look around and we're doing this to Mexico? Who was Mexico not gonna hurt? They're too busy trying to run little war games and crime games down there. Who's gonna pick the fruit? Who's gonna do that hard labor in the sun?
Right.
You know, not me. Who's gonna pick the fruit? Not me. I've been very, very fortunate in life. Sometimes I've chuckled with my friend and said, I'm an Oreo. For those who don't know, it's a black person with a white education. And I'm very understanding, and I am privileged in a lot of ways because I had a lot of help, and it wasn't always black. And I'll make that to you up front. but it has been difficult to pursue happiness. It's been very difficult, not only for me, but for a lot of my friends. In education, I am extremely happy about education, especially when we can give it to our people. I see things in schools now that just make me cringe. They don't teach government. So how are you supposed to know what's going on? How are you supposed to know why you should vote? You know, we have taken the arts out of education. You know, the only people that pursue art are the folks that are in the band or their parents send them somewhere to take voice. You know, this is so important to a civilization. I'm good.
Mark, I can't believe I'm saying this, but you've been uncharacteristically quiet this evening. So, I'd like your take.
Well, to your question,
yes.
you asked the question about do you think that you have an impact on your legislator or your congressman if you call or if you email, write a letter? And I was just going to give my personal experience that I worked for a U.S. Senator in Washington, D.C., and we would get thousands of phone calls and thousands of letters. This was before email. From constituents all across Pennsylvania, all across the country on every issue you can imagine. And one of my jobs was to write responses to all of those constituent concerns and complaints. And it has a direct impact on the legislator. They know we would take polls. We would produce, you know, how many constituent calls were in favor of the welfare reform bill currently pending on the floor, how many opposed. It has a direct influence and impact on the legislators down there in Washington, up here in Harrisburg.
Judge, I want to go to you for a second, if I could. I mean, we've been hearing a lot of talk this evening so far about rights, about freedom, about the way people they can operate within the context of government. You are someone who is charged with upholding the law and looking at the Constitution, and I wonder how that has colored your perceptions of this.
Well, I think I spent almost 41 years on the Common Pleas and Appellate bench of this Commonwealth. I just came in to observe tonight. I didn't realize I was going to be on the first team.
There's no such thing as
We're going to observe you now.
There's no such thing as an idle spectator in this room.
But in any event, I possibly have been an American longer than any of the rest of you. Born in 1939 and vividly recall World War II.
Watch it.
Pardon?
Watch it.
Are we getting close? All right. I was also a Marine at one time. Okay. Yes, we are required to uphold the laws of the Commonwealth and the United States. That's the oath that we take, and we do that. And some judges don't, and I've seen it too often, in my opinion, where judges have factored in perhaps personal thoughts and personal philosophies. There is some room for that at the very highest level of our Supreme Courts, where common law can be defined in such a way as to change things. But my job was to observe a situation and to do justice. Now, what's justice? I think if I gave you a fact situation, everybody in this room would have a little different opinion as to what justice is. But the definition of justice, as far as I'm concerned, I think this is a traditional definition, is as long as the law is followed, then what most people think is just, most of the time, will be what occurs. And when it turns out that most people don't think what is occurring is just, then that can be changed. That can be changed by redefinition of common law, which is a very conservative, slow process, or it can be legislatively changed. Now, on the comments concerning the present situation, political situation of the country, I said I was blessed to be an American. I remember the terror that I had that the Japanese or the Germans were going to take over. I was terrified of that. If you're not old enough to remember that, you can't really think about that. That really was a concern. So going up over the many years, and I carried a rifle too. I never took it to Vietnam or anywhere else. I didn't have to shoot at anybody. Nobody shot at me. God bless them and God bless you that did it. And I mean to thank you from the bottom of my heart that you did the job that you did to keep us free. But yes, I'm extremely blessed to be an American, because I think that if the big problems that the lady from Camp Hill, I'm originally from Lemoyne incidentally, and I rarely disagreed with anybody from Camp Hill, so you can see it. We're on the other end of the spectrum. If there is a big problem with policies, with politics, when I was hiring probation officers, which was my job to do for many years, I always insisted that these people be registered to vote and that they vote. I didn't ask them how they voted. But if they didn't register to vote, I wouldn't hire them. Now, maybe I could get in trouble today for not doing that. But that's the case. So if things are so horrible and terrible, then get the SOB out of there. And I don't think he's an SOB necessarily. I've thought plenty others were, and maybe he is. But when it comes, I'll give you a comment on my position on race. Everybody has the right to prove himself an SOB. And until he or she does, he or she is on my team and part of my country and somebody that I'll have a beer with or whatever. I have a son that's married to a Jewish girl. I have a son that's married to a Mexican girl. And I have a son that's dating very closely a black girl right now.
A lot of sons.
That's all I have. I got all grandsons, and they're all tan.
No girls from Perry County?
No. Anyway, I talk too much. I think it's the greatest country in the world. You look around, lots of faults, lots of problems, lots of blowhard. If you don't like him, get him out of there. If you don't like your representative, get him out of there. One of the things that does concern me as much as anything, and that is one of the indicia of a free and organized and democratic society is the orderly change of power. You don't have a Castro. Incidentally, our president goes to the baseball game with. I'm not so sure that's much different than going to see the guy in Korea. But nevertheless, if there is a representative that you don't like, get him out of there. Do not. I just don't think that we can continue to resist almost violently the change of power in a democratic society. The SOB won. As far as I was concerned, a couple SOBs won before in my lifetime. That goes back before you, but they won. And that's the way it is. You don't like them, get rid of them. In the meantime, this is the greatest country in the world. I'm damn proud of it. I would load that M1 up again, and I would go back out. You don't even know what an M1 is. You might.
No.
Carbine, maybe.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. That is a loaded statement. And I might look young, but when I first went in the Army, I had an M1.
Yeah.
And then I moved to an M14, and then I moved to an M16.
Yeah.
So I've had them all, and I'm not as young as you think I might be.
I never made a choke on M14 or M16, but I did have a BAR. Okay?
I had that too.
I talked too much.
So as long as none of you in here were firing flintlocks, I think we're all safe. Keeping it to you next.
I was happy to hear that Mark Scaringi and I have something in common because I also work for a U.S. Senator. But over the last several elections, something has happened to our political process. I spent 45 years in government, state government, local government, federal government. And I grew up at a time and had a mentor, Kaylee Roy Irvis, who was a statesman, where Republicans got along with Democrats. And the purpose was to create the best law that you could at the state level, at the federal level. But over the last several elections, it's become mean and nasty, you know, where Democrats hate Republicans, Republicans hate Democrats, and that didn't happen before. People worked together. You had, you know, your platform, I had my platform, but when work was over, we sat down and we tried to come up with a law that served the most people. Because like the gentleman said down there, government is about serving people. It's not about serving parties. All of a sudden, it's all about what party does this and what party does that. And as a result, if you haven't noticed, nothing has gotten accomplished in Congress in years. In years, you know? I mean, and you know, the current president has taken over the whole Republican Party. There is no Republican Party. And I mean, how long are we going to allow this to go on where nothing gets accomplished? I mean, the platform was to make America great again. I don't see it happening.
You know, lateral claw.
John, when you asked your question, I was one of the ones, I didn't raise my hand to say writing to your elected officials would do any good. And the reason I said that, and the reason I felt that is that our politics are too polarized right now. They're too polarized. I think there's more, our elected officials, there's more fear that if they don't go with the people who are in power, they won't get reelected. And I thought serving was not about getting reelected, but serving the people's needs, establishing laws and rules that would effectively and equitably basically cause everybody to live in freedom and basically enjoy the fruits of this country. I don't see that. I don't see that writing a congressman or a representative will do anything because, again, they're afraid. I see fear. And I mean, when I see fear, we know that whatever party you have, you've got elected officials who aren't doing right. Okay, call them out. That's what you're supposed to do. Okay, when you fail to do that as a party, then you're not serving the people. And I don't see either party serving the people right now. It's got to be I wouldn't call it a street fight anymore. It's just a mess. Okay, and until we basically fix that, nothing's going to happen.
Actually, I want to get the microphone down to the other side of the room. My friends down here have been very patient. Well, and then we'll just move our way down the road.
Well, in terms of, I cannot make President Trump do anything, that's correct. But there's something called grassroots activism. This is where you get together with your neighbors and you learn to discuss things. America is learning, has forgotten how to discuss things. They've forgotten how to politely argue or to discuss and come out with best solutions and compromise on certain things. So I'm working on knocking on doors about issues and informing people about certain issues and what they might be able to do. So I'm not going to go to a congressman. I will grab a group of people so it is by the people, not just me, not my single voice, but the voice of my community. And hopefully I can be successful at working on some of these tax issues, some of these veteran issues. But things did happen, like the Mission Act. That was very nice. It helps veterans go to private services when the VA is overloaded. But I believe in the American people. I don't believe in politicians. And to bring it to the people's need, bring things that people want, you have to get the people educated on what they can have, why they should have it, get an argument about it, get educated, get in book clubs, and then speak to power as a group. Thank you.
Tanya.
I have to agree with him 100%. I loved everything that you just said. I agree with it, and I would just add that along with educating our people, really show the importance of the power of voting, like the judge said. If we don't like the SOB, forgive me, Mom, get the SOB out of there.
Get them out.
That's a term of art.
And I would have to agree. I think that we as a people, during the election felt as though that the candidates of choice weren't worth going to the polls. I think that the voting turnout was low overall compared to other turnouts comparably to Barack Obama. But I think that we've become apathetic. We've become really disheartened at politics today. I think it's become a place where they just take off the gloves and just fight it out, and that they forgot what they're there for, which is for the people. So, I would have to agree, grassroots, that's where my mind is thinking now. knock on doors, start now. You know, get people engaged and involved. I was extremely proud of our young people that in remembrance of the 17 victims that were shot at, killed in the school grounds in Florida, that they walked out. They're exercising their freedoms. They marched on Washington. I am very proud of our young people. And I look to them as the example of where we should be as a country. Fight for what we believe in, fight for our freedoms. And that's, and going back to my statement, that further puts the statement in why I am proud, because we still do have those liberties that we can protest, we can fight, and we can fight back against the system.
James.
Okay, I'm kind of stuck back to the question that you asked. Can we blame what's going on the current administration? I don't know if anyone else remember him saying that, and then we just, like, you know, got away from it. I look at it like when people talk about the destruction of the family and the destruction of our schools, it didn't happen overnight, okay? What's going on now with the administration started brewing 8 years ago behind the scenes. And then once that period came over, that those 8 years were over, it surfaced and it reared its evil head. And it felt confident. It felt, you know, empowered. And it just got out of hand, because what's going on now, although I experienced it, I mean, I said to someone before, I said, I've been black 58 years. And they laughed. Oh yeah, for real? And right there, they didn't understand what I was saying. I've experienced a lot. You know, you all talk about military service. My father was a 30-year veteran of the military, fought in 3 wars, Korean conflict, World War II, 2 tours of Nam, a combat engineer, earned a Bronze Star. I'm proud to say that. And I basically followed, but only in law enforcement that I followed, you know. And I'm glad that he was able to. You know, I have a portrait of JFK where he met JFK, and then for him to live long enough to see a black president. But, you know, getting back to what I was saying about what was brewing, it was brewing over 8 years. And like I said, it just, you can't blame it. I don't blame it on the administration. I blame it on that opportunity for them to just, you know, rear their evil head and for the destruction to be there. And it didn't happen overnight. It was over a period of time, and it's not going to be put to sleep overnight. It's going to take some time and some effort.
Trevor, you real quick, and then back over to Mike.
Sure.
Thanks.
Fearless. I would like to go back and change my first word to fearless.
All right.
Because I think as Americans we are fearless. And we shouldn't be feared, which is what this current president seems to like to do. He likes to label, he likes to put down, and he wants to put people in a position of fear because he acts like a dictator. And that is what I believe drew him to want to meet Kim Jong-un, whatever. Excuse me, I boggled that. But I do believe that as Americans, we really are fearless. We have overcome a lot in our history, and that we should not be labeling anyone, because that really is what makes America great, that we do come from all different backgrounds. And I would never label if my child would marry somebody who did not look exactly like she does or whatever. That would still be my son-in-law, my daughter-in-law, not, oh, they're this color or that color, or, you know, people don't say, oh, look at that white Irish girl. You know? We're just Americans.
All right, take it from right back. Mike, you've been very patient.
Sure, thank you.
Thanks.
Got it. Anyway, I'll be mercifully brief. Your Honor mentioned something about justice and everything. I would just add that justice is supposedly blind, and that's the only thing I would add to your more eloquent statements that you made. I would just say that you shouldn't underestimate the power of one person. And I could get political and say we've got the greatest economy while Europe is tanking. Their economy's in, we got the lowest unemployment in 45 years. But I'm going to jump out of that and talk about the things that really matter. And to me, we have more things that we agree on than that we disagree on. And I think a lot of the stories I hear here are genuine. I mean, they're absolutely genuine. I mean, I can't put myself in a situation that a lot of people put themselves in. So I respect that. But on the other hand, I'm proud to be an American, and 4th of July I'll celebrate like everybody else, and I'll look at the positive things. But just getting back, and I said I'd be mercifully brief, I'll rush through it. Don't underestimate the power. I've gotten through the CEOs where I've had a bone to pick. And one of the keys is make sure if you're calling your senator, your congressman, let them know your zip code, that you're a constituent. If you're not a constituent, they'll hang up on you, or they'll give you the quick brush off. But be persistent and use the most irritating voice that you can use. You've got to be irritating, persistent, consistent, and insistent. And as Bear Bryant would say, agile, mobile, and hostile.
You pass on to Sandy, then we'll get back to the other side of the room, promise.
I was among the first class of folks who was able to vote at age 18 when the age got changed. And I would never dream of not voting. And ever since I've been able to do so, I have been contacting my elected officials. Things have changed in the terms of how the responses come. I felt that I got much more courteous, substantive responses years ago. There are times now, and I won't say who the person was, but I walked into my representative's office to speak to the legislative director, saying that I lived in the district, and when they asked where I lived and I said Harrisburg, he said, "Are you sure?" And I thought, what an insulting thing for somebody to say, I work as an advocate, I know where I live, and I vote. I'm appalled sometimes at the way some of the elected officials talk to us when we go in. I do have to agree, though, the grassroots thing is so important, and being prepared, being informed, you have to, it's our responsibility to know what's going on, to be able to talk knowledgeably with our officials about what it is we want from them. So I work all the time in coalition, wide range of people. I happen to come from the faith community, but we bring together coalitions of folks who represent a lot of different people. And I think that it's important to show that there may be a wide range of people. It's not just this group or that group that represents an opinion about what's going on. So the other thing I want to say, though, is I'm really encouraged because I think of what's been happening, that there are more people running. The frustration for me over the last few years is the number of seats that were running unopposed. And that is really disheartening. And to see this year that there are a lot more people running is encouraging to me.
So we can get the kindness and open-heartedness of all Americans, get this down to the end of the row before anyone steps in. Down to Brandon, who was waiting very kindly.
So just to touch on the question you asked about the responsiveness of elected officials.
Yeah.
I know there were a few folks that mentioned about long and decorated careers in either state, federal, local government. I still have the pleasure of still being immersed in that world currently, and also being on the recipient end of those constituent responses. We're now in a information and digitized age now that, I forget who mentioned it, about legislators now, they track the metrics of how many folks are calling or asking for services or have constituent responses, and based upon the volume of folks that come into that office or have inquiries determines staffing levels as well too. So that's something to be mindful of, that you know, they are, in some cases, some members are, they do respond to that, and they do try to give you their undivided attention. But as I mentioned, we do live in an information age, so you know, a lot of the elected officials, so for all the, I get to see, a lot of them are just as uninformed as the civilians or the laymen, you know. A lot of times they're getting 300-page bills the day before or the day of, and there's no way that they're able to digest that information. And we talked about walking the party line. It's pretty much dictated to them from their respective leader. Here's how you're supposed to vote. Or I've had legislators ask me, how should I be voting on this? Or how did so-and-so out? How did legislator X vote? So, you know, kind of tying it back to that privilege, we do have the privilege of living in that information age where we can be abreast to what's happening and have the same degree, in many cases, same degree of information as the elected official, so we can talk intelligently and put forth, you know, cogent arguments. So, you know, I did want to mention that, you know, but to the gentleman's point, certainly, you know, one person, one knowledgeable person, getting the ear of their legislator may or may not be able to, you may not be able to make a dent in things, but certainly educating your fellow man and fellow woman on you know, that information that's at their disposal. You mentioned, Sandy, about you know, the groundswell of candidates that are now running, that information age. You know, sometimes we lift up our elected officials, we apotheosize them, we treat them like, you know, demigods of sort, and at the end of the day, you know, they're just the same as you and I. So, but when we lift them up, you know, a lot of them buy into that, and they do begin to feel that, you know, feel that way. So, it's important to always impress upon them that they're no different than we are. And I am here to say that, you know, and even as a staffer, I would get a letter sometimes or a correspondence where, you know, I mean, I would acknowledge it, but there was something, you know, I can pretty much see from the first sentence whether this is a real, you know, if there's something to this inquiry. So it is about the approach as well. But, you know, there's power in numbers, so definitely agree with you here. But I did want to mention that. And then also, I will presume, being the only millennial on this panel here, you know, we have a different approach, you know, and I benefited from a lot of the sacrifices that you all made. That's how I was able to, that privilege was able to trickle down. But we do kind of, you know, millennials do tend to see the good in one another and try to work collaboratively. So I'm also glad that we have more millennials also running for elected officers. So just wanted to shout out our millennials before we conclude.
We have about 3 or 4 minutes left. I want to just ask really quick, one lightning round question. How many, since the moment you registered to vote, how many lifetime voters on the panel tonight?
I missed your question.
How many lifetime, since you've been registered to vote, is there an unbroken streak of voting?
About one primary, I missed because I had an injured son.
Okay, so that's, I'm sorry, show your hands again? Hands it back up.
There we go.
1, 2, 3, 4. That's pretty darn good. All right, we will give the last word to...
Thank you. I appreciate that. Listen, when I went in the military, I took an oath. It's the very same oath that everybody takes when they take office. To defend not a person, not a flag, but to defend the Constitution of the United States. It's important for us to recognize that we are upholding that piece of paper that made us America. And sometimes we forget about that. We forget there's a Constitution. And we let other people tell us what Americans are. We allow folk to divide us and conquer us. We allow folk to do whatever they can. Say the black man is no good. He's unintelligent. We shouldn't be around him. say the Hispanic is trying to take our job. We allow that to happen. But we've got to recognize if we're going to be that one nation under God, then we got to stop allowing folks to tell everybody who we are. And we've got to show it. We got to vote. We got to protest. We got to do everything we can to let folk know that we are real Americans. That is it. Now, for me, it's difficult. But as you can tell, I'm a fighter. And I will fight you until the last breath is in me. That's where it stands.
All right, I got no way to follow that except to say thank you to all of you. It's been a really great and constructive panel, and I appreciate everybody coming out tonight. Thanks a lot, and have a great summer. Thanks. Good night, everybody.